So we're here with Matt Delaney from the Washington Times. Matt, thanks for joining us. You've been writing about all sorts of things, but one article I saw that kind of stood out here was about New York State, and a electric vehicle provision. What's going on there?
Yes, so New York is taking a page out of California's book where they're going to use regulations to set or to kind of control the market about what kind of vehicles they want people to purchase. So I believe it's by 2026. They want about roughly a third of the market to be, hold on, I'm double checking my work here, but want about, 35% of all vehicles sold by 2026 to require zero emissions, which right now the main option for that is electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
That jumps up to nearly 70% 4 years later in 2030. And then by 2035, they want all vehicles to be zero emissions. So they're trying to do what they think is best for the environment, and that is mainly going after gas-powered vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's even really feasible up there? I mean, it's a pretty rough transition to go to, 1/3 of the entire state's car fleet in a couple years, and then increase it every 4 years after that. I mean, that seems a little bit tough to me. What have some of the locals been saying about this?
In New York, they were pushing back where mainly commercial drivers
Mm-hmm.
are having trouble with it as well. And I don't know if they're necessarily affected. So let me put it that way. I'm not totally familiar with the exact language. They haven't even put out language, let me say, for the regulation proposal.
Mm-hmm.
But really, there's barriers to access with these kinds of vehicles because they're already considered luxury vehicles because they're in like the mid 60s when it comes to price point, where the average vehicle is in the mid to upper 40s. And it's also, too, there's an infrastructure barrier. Gas stations are everywhere. They're ubiquitous in this country.
Mm-hmm.
But electric charging stations, not so much. And I was looking into, before we hopped into this, I was looking into prices for electric charging stations, and I believe it's about $6,000 per port at a station. Let me see if I can double check that.
Mm-hmm.
But in California is getting a lot of money federally. They're getting a lot actually from the Investment in Jobs Act of 2021, which I believe it might have been the Infrastructure Act.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. Oh yeah, the infrastructure investment.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it must be tough if you're up in upstate New York. I mean, to find a charging station, maybe a more rural area. So I could see people being kind of upset about that. But I guess one of their justifications for this, in your article, you said it was to benefit low-income communities that might be impacted adversely by pollution. But at the same time, you're telling those same communities, like, hey, there's a good chance you're going to have to be buying a really expensive electric vehicle. I don't see that kind of meshing there. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, I've always kind of personally just wondered, where are the death tolls from climate change? Who is keeping track of those statistics, and who are the reported deaths from climate change, whatever it may be. And yeah, it does seem to be, logically at odds with, they're trying to benefit a community by getting people who probably aren't a part of that community to buy a product that they may not even be able to get fuel for on a regular basis. So it's just a lot of the fallacies are all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And of course they're using, climate change to justify this, but I think they're also conflating pollution, which is separate from climate change. I mean, I think, all Americans want to control, the bad kind of things that come out of emissions, not necessarily just CO2, but other gases coming out, hard pollutants. That's a little bit different than climate change there, but it's, I think, part of how they try to push these things is they try to put it all under the umbrella of climate change, count all sorts of deaths as attributed to climate change, when it could be all sorts of things there. But I think, it'd be very tough to afford an electric vehicle. They're probably going to get it cheaper in the next, in the next few years, just because that's how markets function. You have more consumer choice, you're able to afford more different things. But if they're just going to be artificially cheaper because of some sort of subsidy you can get for buying one, that's totally different. Have they talked about anything like that, about subsidizing electric vehicles at the same time, or is this just kind of like a stick forcing you to go out and buy an electric vehicle? in New York.
I think they're setting a benchmark and then hoping things just fall into place. If I had to take a guess here, again, I haven't seen any kind of incentives about buying electric vehicles or anything like that, any kind of
Mm-hmm.
subsidies that are going out to make them more affordable. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, hey, here's the goal, and we're going to figure it out as we go.
And you're still paying for those subsidies just in your tax dollars. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of similar to what you're also writing about in Los Angeles, another blue city in a very blue state, coming from the angle of COVID policies that are still there. So they still have an eviction moratorium up, and that's set to possibly expire early next year. What's happening there?
Yeah, so they actually just last night at the LA City Council, they passed unanimously to end the eviction moratorium by February 1st of next year. Now, that being said, people still have until, I believe, August 1st of next year to pay off whatever rent that they have due from, I believe it's March 2020 until about September 30th, 2021. So whichever back rent you have owed during that time frame, you have till next August to pay off. And then from October 2021 until next February, you have until the following February. So that's February 2024 now to pay off any back rent from then.
Mm-hmm.
And, once February 2024 rolls around as well, rent controlled apartments, which again, rent controlled apartments, I didn't even realize this until I started reporting. It's 75% of the city's apartment units.
Really?
So
in
they
LA?
can so they can raise the price again come February 2024. But that's essentially 4 years now when all is said and done, where people either didn't have to pay rent or they're paying it in staggered amounts or their rent's not even going up. So it's really crazy when you consider all those things.
At the same time that President Biden has recently said that the pandemic is over, but we don't know about that. But this also reminds me, it's very similar to how the national moratorium, the Supreme Court threw that out. I believe it was last year, and you had people saying, "Oh my gosh, there's going to be so many people on the streets with this. It's going to be awful. People will be losing their homes." I don't think we necessarily saw that come to pass. At least the same way that people who supported the moratorium thought it would. What have they said about that in LA? Do you think that there's going to be people losing their homes about this? What are they saying?
They said there was a big concern about, of course, advocates are very concerned about the possibility of it happening. I believe California, one of the articles I read, I can't cite it off the top of my head, but I think they said they only had a 2% increase in homelessness, which again, nobody likes to see people out on the streets and suffering in any way, shape, or form. But 2% is not necessarily alarm bells level of concern.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, again, it'll work itself out as it did when the national eviction moratorium ended, I believe last August when the Supreme Court struck it down.
Sure. Super interesting. We'll have to keep watching that. But Matt, thanks for coming on today. I hope to have you on again soon.
Thanks for your time, Peter. Really appreciate it.
Thank you too.